Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Omnipod. Take Omnipod Dash out for a spin with a no-commitment free 30-day trial. By Inhaled Insulin, fast in, fast out, fits your lifestyle. And by Dexcom. Take control of your diabetes and live life to the fullest with Dexcom.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
This week, big news from Sernova, one of the companies hoping that implantable stem cells will be a functional cure for diabetes. They recently announced that the first person with type 1 in their trial is completely off injected or infused insulin and is making their own.
That's what I call a functional cure. Our first person that has become insulin independent, what I call insulin independent is not taking insulin every once in a while. It's like not taking insulin at all and not needing to have CGM or continuous glucose monitoring or not having to worry about things.
That's Dr. Philip Toleikis, Sernova's president and CEO. He explains how their process differs from some of the other companies looking at stem cells, talks about their partnerships, and shares more about the patients doing well in this trial. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Welcome to another week of the show. Always so glad to have you here. You know we aim to educate and inspire about diabetes with a focus on people who use insulin. We have a lot of new people. We had more downloads in May than in any month since I started the podcast. And for the last episode, it was the first week of June. It was all about Dexcom. We had the most downloads for any episode previously. So if you are new, my son was diagnosed with type 1 just before he turned 2. He is now 17. My husband lives with type 2 diabetes. I don't have diabetes, but I have a background in broadcasting, and that's why I started the show back in 2015. And one of my favorite things to do, really it's such a privilege, is to talk to these companies about what's coming up. I love the inspiring stories. It's fantastic to talk to, athletes and celebrities and everyday people just living with diabetes. But it's when I can really dig in and talk to these folks that might get some mainstream media coverage, might get some stock market coverage, but ask your questions to these companies that are really going to make a difference. That is really the main reason why I started this show 7 years ago. And stem cells they really seem to be having a moment, if I can say it that way. We spoke to the folks from ViaCyte earlier this year. Vertex made waves. They had that big New York Times write-up last fall. Vertex, however, has been placed on an FDA hold, but they still presented their findings at the recent ADA Scientific Sessions conference. And my guests presented their findings as well. This interview happened just before the ADA conference. So I want to give you a headline on what they presented, and then Dr. Toleikis will fill in the blanks and give us a lot more background. Sernova, which is based in Canada, has a cell pouch system. It's an implantable device, and it forms what they call a natural environment for long-term survival of cells. In this case, it would be islet cells, which are the cells that make insulin. That is an extreme oversimplification, and I will link up a lot more information so you can read the study and look at this more fully. But there were 6 patients in the most recent study. They both went the cell pouch implementation and islet transplantation. All of these people have been living with type 1 for a long time. The first person that they talk about in this study for more than 40 years. The first 3 patients are now all off of insulin, and their A1Cs are 5.2 or lower. So that is considered normal, non-diabetic range. There is a long way to go here, just as with all the companies looking at stem cell research, but it's happening. And it's happening without immunosuppressive drugs, and that really is the goal here. Okay, as I said, I spoke to Dr. Toleikis just before the ADA conference and before this study came out, but he does touch on the news that was released. He's going to go through the process with us. That's coming up in just a moment, but first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Omnipod, and you know that I'm a big fan of choice when it comes to diabetes technology. I get so excited when there's something new, because look, if you live with diabetes, whatever type, whatever age, you deserve to find the best fit for you. That's just one reason I'm working with Omnipod to help spread the word about their program that makes it so easy to test their system out. It's the Omnipod Dash free trial. If you want to try an insulin pump or see what life without tubes is all about, you can now try Omnipod Dash free for 30 days. The trial comes with no commitment or obligation. Not right for you? No problem. Go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Omnipod logo. For full safety risk information and free trial terms and conditions, check out omnipod.com/diabetesconnections. Philip, welcome to Diabetes Connections. I appreciate you taking some time out to share some information with me and my listeners.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
I'm so glad to have you. We have not talked before. We've talked about Sernova, but I'm excited to have somebody from the company on. Would you mind kind of dialing back and telling us a little bit about what the main goal is at the company?
Sure. If you think about people that have chronic diseases or where they're missing a protein or hormone in the body, and this can be anything from type 1 diabetes to hemophilia to many rare diseases where people are requiring a hormone to be taken every day. What has to happen is that you end up having to take multiple injections. And not only that, but you have to be able to follow all the side effects. And a lot of these indications that are out there have really difficult side effects if you don't get the right amount of protein or hormone in your body. So what Sernova is doing is looking at having or creating what we call a functional cure for all of these people that have these afflictions. And if we want to talk about type 1 diabetes to begin with, what we're doing is very simple. And people that have type 1 diabetes have lost the ability of their islets. And these islets read blood sugar levels in the body, and they produce insulin and other hormones appropriately. These islets are found in the pancreas, obviously. And so what Sernova is doing, and the goal is to provide a functional cure for everyone by putting new cells in the body that can read blood sugar levels and produce insulin appropriately. And the way that we're doing this is really relatively simple. So we have developed a small implantable medical device that is placed deep under the skin, and it's about the size of a business card. And the way it works is that the device itself is very, very porous. It has lots of holes in it. And the body naturally fills in all of these little holes with vascularized tissue. So these are tissue that have blood vessels. So what we're trying to do is create an organ-like environment for placement of the new therapeutic cells. In about 3 weeks, we developed these beautiful, highly vascularized tissue chambers in our little tiny device. And then at that point, we can go and put the new therapeutic cells in. And these therapeutic cells can be donor islets, which are available to a small population, or we can put in a stem cell derived technology. And these stem cell derived technology that we have just announced that we have done a collaboration and we'll have a licensing deal soon with this from Evotech is able to produce essentially fully functional islets. And we can produce as many of these as we can to be able to treat millions of patients. So if you think about it, and we put these new islet cells into the device, those islet cells will start to read blood sugar levels and release insulin appropriately in the body. So what we're really doing is creating a new mini pancreas for everyone. And the idea here is that we want to have regular, normal control of blood sugar levels. We want to also be able to release the other hormones like glucagon and somatostatin from these cells appropriately so that people with hypoglycemic events, so that we can eliminate the concern about hypoglycemia. And then also looking at eliminating the issues with hypoglycemia unawareness. This is our goal for type 1 diabetes.
All right, I have a billion questions, but that it's amazing to think about everything you said there. So let's start with what I think is my listener's first question is, does it work? You've done this, I know you're in trials. Can you share what's happened so far?
We have been working on this technology for over 13 years, and this is not just something new. And we have done with our device and therapeutic cells, we have done a large number of what we call preclinical models so that we can test the cells in preclinical models of type 1 diabetes. And we have been able to show that the device with the therapeutic cells can cause insulin independent long term. We've done some early, what we call clinical trial work with patients that have severe type 1 diabetes and hypoglycemia unawareness, right? So these are the people that are able to take donor islets. And what we started to do is work with donor islets. And this occurred before stem cell derived technologies were advanced far enough from our perspective. And what we first had to show is that the device placed deep under the skin was safe, didn't cause any inflammatory reactions. So we did that. And then when we put the islets into the device chambers, where we provided an organ-like environment for these cells, we found that the islets survived, that, which is really important, that they were able to interact with the small blood vessels within the device. They were able to produce insulin, and that is measured by a biomarker that I'm sure you're aware of called C-peptide. And we were able to show, when we removed devices, we were able to show under the microscope, essentially, that we could see insulin, we saw blood vessels, we saw C-peptide stained, we saw somatostatin and glucagon. So we were able to prove that those cells were all producing what they needed to. So that was perfect for that first initial try. And then we started to work at the University of Chicago with Dr. Witowski, who is a well-known transplant surgeon and has spent many years working on type 1 diabetes and essentially treating patients with donor islets. And what we were able to do is place the device, again, deep under the skin, put the therapeutic cells in. And our first study is using the anti-rejection medications. And we were able to show two things. One is that when we put the cells in the device, we were able to get C-peptide into the bloodstream. And that's really, really important, because now we're able to show that not only are the cells surviving or the islets are surviving, the vascular system is developing and the blood sugar is being measured by these islets and releasing insulin into the bloodstream of the people who have diabetes. So that's the next critical step that we had to show. And importantly, in this study, one of the most important things that we're learning now is how many islets do we need to put into the device to achieve better and better efficacy. And what we have learned is we've kind of figured out that if we pack the cells into the device, typically like you do when we're doing portal vein delivery, because most of the cells are dying there, we found that the efficacy actually went down. So it's kind of the opposite of what you might expect. So what we did was, in the clinical trials, that we reduced the number of islets that we put in the devices as we're going forward. And lo and behold, we found that the amount of C-peptide that was released into the bloodstream went up about 500%. And the reason, we believe, is because if you think about what islets do, they need space to, what I call, breathe. And they need to read the blood sugar levels in the local environment. And if you have all the islets packed in together, then they essentially turn each other off because they're all happy and they all are seeing normal blood sugar levels. So we found that if we spread those islets out, then those islets are getting to see the real blood sugar levels in your blood. And then they're able to release insulin more appropriately. So this is one of the first and most important things that we found in the study that we're moving forward with.
Before you move on, I do want to jump in. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there still. But a couple of minutes ago, you mentioned severe type 1, people with hypoglycemia unawareness. As you listen, yes, pretty much everybody with type 1, has a severe case. But if you're not familiar, the people that qualify for these trials in general are people that have hypoglycemia unawareness and issues with hypoglycemia that is so severe that they can't drive, they can't travel, their lives are totally disrupted in a way that isn't the usual case. I have a couple of friends who've been in these trials, and it's unbelievable how a normal life really just seems out of reach. I have a good friend who she couldn't drive anymore. She couldn't travel. She could never be alone. And a different type of implantation really changed her life. But I did want to interject that, because if you're not familiar with these trials, it sounds like, well, everybody has a bad case of type 1.
Right.
I did want to also ask, you mentioned this was a time when people still needed to take the anti-rejection drugs, that the body, sees an intruder, responds, and you really had to tamp that down. Is that still the case with the current trials? Right back to Dr. Toleikis answering my question. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Afrezza. And I know you have a lot of questions about Afrezza, because every time I mention it, the emails and DMs come on in. So what is it all about? Well, Afrezza is an ultra-rapid acting mealtime insulin. You breathe it in using an oral inhaler, Afrezza gives you the flexibility to eat when you want while providing proven blood sugar control. Afrezza's ultra-rapid action allows you to inhale your insulin right when food arrives, even unexpectedly, so you can be spontaneous but still in control without the need for injections at mealtime. Find out more and see if Afrezza is right for you. Go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Afrezza logo. Afrezza can cause serious side effects, including sudden lung problems and low potassium, and is not for patients with chronic lung disease, such as asthma or COPD, or for patients allergic to insulin. Tell your doctor if you ever smoked, have ever had kidney or liver problems, a history of lung cancer, or if you are pregnant or breastfeeding. Most common side effects are low blood sugar, cough, and sore throat. Severe low blood sugar can be fatal. Do not replace long-acting insulin with Afrezza. Afrezza is not for use to treat diabetic ketoacidosis. Please see full prescribing information, including boxed warning, medication guide, and instructions for use on afrezza.com/safety. Now back to Dr. Toleikis answering my question about anti-rejection drugs.
Let me just step back and explain what our technologies are about.
Great.
Our ultimate goal is to get a functional cure, what we call the complete regenerative medicine product, right? Because people don't want to be taking all these drugs. So when you're starting, so if you think about it, and everyone knows this, everyone has been taking insulin injections by needle or by pump for the last 100 years. And as far as I'm concerned, I haven't seen any really disruptive technologies that make lives of people with type 1 diabetes better, really better. We developed our technologies with a lot of background experience. And there's 3 parts to the technology. One of them is, where do we put the cells? And we believe that the cells need to go into a device that is placed deep under the skin, and that device can be removed if necessary, and a new device can be put in. Because we get asked all the time, how long are these cells going to last in your device? And our approach is, it doesn't matter in a sense, because if necessary, we can remove the device, put in a new one, and put in new cells, just like you put new gas in your gas tank.
Wow.
Second part of the technology is the cells themselves, right? So starting off, what Sernova did, and we've been doing clinical work for a long time, we decided to use human donor islets because they are already available. And there are what we call GMP facilities like Dr. Witowski has, where he can bring in the pancreas of a donor, isolate the islets, and then we can place those islets into the device. So those are the real thing that we already know work in all of us that don't have type 1 diabetes. So what we wanted to do is first use those donor islets to be able to test the function of the device. But that only provides a limited number of people that can get donor islets. And it's really now just set for the people who have severe hypoglycemic unaware events that you were talking about, right? Because they can actually die from these. But as we're going forward, our goal was to provide an unlimited supply of cells. So how do we get that unlimited supply of cells? And technologies have been developing around the cells for the past 15 years. And Sernova looked all around the world for what we call iPSC cell technology, a cell technology that is derived from a single cell in the body that is a stem cell that is derived ethically. So we didn't want to use embryonic stem cells. We wanted to use a cell that everybody would feel comfortable using. And then we worked with a number of large pharmaceutical companies who are trying to develop these iPSC cells into fully differentiated islets. And we worked with Evotech for a number of years testing their cells in our device. And we found out that they work beautifully in models. So recently, just a few weeks ago, we announced a collaboration where we're going to be able to get that unlimited supply of Evotech's islet cells, that are fully differentiated islets that we can put into patients as we're going forward. That's our second kind of generation, right? The third part of the technology is, and you named it well, how do you protect those cells from attack by the immune system? There are some groups that are trying to develop what we call an immune-protected device, macro device. We don't believe that will work. And so what we have done is our first clinical trials are using anti-rejection medications. And we're working with the people who have severe hypoglycemic unaware events. But we have also worked on how do we protect the cells from immune system attack without any drugs long term. So we found the technology called conformal coating that is able to provide a coating around the cells that can protect them from immune system attack. And we put an agreement together with the University of Miami and Dr. Tomei, who's been working on this such technology for the past 12 years. Now, when you look at this, you can see our first clinical trials involved donor islets, immunosuppression, and cell pouch. And in that particular trial, we have been able to show that we can, with the right dosing of cells, that we have been able to, we have a patient that has been type 1 diabetic for 47 years who has now become insulin independent for 2 years on our product so far. And now we have a second patient that also has become insulin independent, the second person. And there will be more. So
can you tell us a little bit about them? I mean, in terms of what, well, I guess what I should say is, can you tell us a little bit about what does insulin independent really mean? I mean, no long acting, no basal insulin, no insulin at all?
Okay, this is what it means. I always like to say that with our technology, and I know like the first clinical trials are with the anti-rejection medications, but we're moving as rapidly as possible to get the other technologies built in and then get that, have that unlimited supply of cells. We're doing all these things in parallel. But the key feature here is if you can just sit down and imagine, close your eyes and go, okay, I have, with Sernova's technology going forward, I am decided that I'm going to go swimming. I'm going to put my bathing suit on and I'm going to jump in the pool and get out of the pool, do whatever I want. And then I'm going to go and have dinner. And I'm not even going to think about anything because my blood sugar levels are being controlled by this mini organ with new islet cells in it. That's basically as simple as it is. That's what I call a functional cure. Our first person that has become insulin independent, what I call insulin independent is not taking insulin every once in a while. It's like not taking insulin at all and not needing to have CGM or continuous glucose monitoring or not having to worry about things. Just as everyone else in the world, we all have to watch our diets and make sure we eat appropriately. That's what I call a functional cure. And that's what I think people with type 1 diabetes want. Like, that's what you want.
Oh, heck yeah. Trust me, you're preaching to the choir. But to be clear, these people that we're talking about most recently, we know what the goal is. We're excited. We know it's going to take a long time. But the people that you say are insulin independent, that's what you mean. These two people, they don't take any insulin. They don't inject, they don't infuse.
That's correct.
Great. I hate to ask it like that, but sometimes people are like, well, they take a basal shot once a day, and that's not what we're talking about.
No, that's not what's happening right now.
What is the procedure like to implant the cell pouch? What does the patient go through?
Yeah. So basically, we have to make a cut in the skin, and then because it's under the skin, it's not into what we call where your organs are, the interperitoneal cavity. It just goes down, and then there's a little pocket made down at the level where a muscle is, deep under the skin and the fat tissue, and then the pouches are slid under there. And then you get it closed off, and then you go home that day. And then you wait about 3 weeks. And then for this, let's just move forward and make out that we have the stem cell technology ready to go. It's immune protected. And so what would happen is the surgeon would call up our manufacturing facility and they would say, I need this many islets, and these are the stem cell derived islets. Mm-hmm. This patient, they would be shipped. Patient would come back in. They would make a small cut in the skin again to get to the pouches. And then they would put in the cells. Same thing. They would go home. And then these are the immune protected cells. And then they would go home, and then they would be followed and then see how the cells are working.
I know no one ever wants to talk timelines. I understand that. But we have these two patients that you mentioned, that seem to be doing quite well. And there's more to come, as you said. What do the next couple of years look like for you all? What is your hope, in other words, for next year, the year after? I'm not asking you when this would be on the market or when people could just sign up without being in trials, but what's next?
Yeah, so we do things in parallel in Sernova. So we're continuing to run our first clinical trial and continue to enroll patients. And we're actually working with a slightly larger device that what we found is that what we'd like to do is put in additional cells, but we want to spread them out. So we put in additional islets, then we think we can get better function, right? Because what we're trying to do is, as everyone knows, every single person that has type 1 diabetes has a bit of a different type 1 diabetes. And we want to be able to put in enough cells in our device so that we can treat everybody and everyone be able to be successful. So we're working on that right now with our donor islet study. At the same time, everyone probably knows we're working and collaborating with Evotech, who has this iPSC stem cell derived technology that can form into fully functional islets. And what we're doing right now is working with them to combine that technology in our cell pouch in preparation for our first clinical trial. So that's happening in parallel. And the third thing that we're doing is we have a major collaboration with Dr. Tomei at the University of Miami working on the conformal coating technology, which is the polymer coating that goes around the cells that allows those cells to become blind to immune system attack, right? And so the idea is the ultimate goal that we're going to have over the next little while is to combine cell pouch with the stem cell derived technology that is locally immune protected from the immune system. And that way, the idea is that when we place the device into the person with type 1 diabetes, we know how many cells need to go in. Those cells are protected from immune system attack, and it ends up being a relatively simple procedure. They get new cells, what we call a mini pancreas, and then their blood sugar levels start to get controlled normally again. And we already know that if you have new islet cells in your body, then the diabetes side effects, such as, first you get what we call the microvascular, the blood vessel effects start to go away. And then we believe long-term, the issues like blindness, amputations, heart disease, all of these things will start to be alleviated because your blood sugar level is controlled much better and you're not having to sit and worry about it on top of that. That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah. Have you worked in your career with people with type 1? I know you've got a lot. Your bio is like a book, so there's a lot going on there. But I'm curious if you have.
So I have a PhD, and I did my PhD in the diabetes field right from the beginning. And I'm not an MD, I'm a PhD, right? So in our clinical trials, we work with our surgeon and our MD. Our staff meets the patients who have type 1 diabetes because they have actually been in the surgical suites, et cetera, appropriately. And importantly, I have met many people that have type 1 diabetes. And also I get emails from mothers around the world all the time. So we know what this is like. We know, especially with people that have hypoglycemia unawareness or young children who have type 1 diabetes, and it just gets sprung on you without any warning. So we know how painful this is, which is why we are so dedicated to getting to what we call functional care.
And I laugh, obviously, there's nothing funny, but I am one of those moms who, if I wasn't doing the podcast, I would be saying, hello, when can my son get this?
Yeah. And the thing about it is we're working with the FDA very closely and we're working with our surgeons, and we're not the only ones working on this. There is going to be a cell therapy functional cure, if not more than one, out in the next number of years. And even if you talk to the Juvenile Diabetes Foundation, they're totally focused on the cell therapy approach right now. 10 years ago, that's not true because it wasn't ready yet. But I believe that the stem cell world has developed scientifically enormously to the point where we now have fully functional islets. We have the ability to manufacture these at the right number and in a cost-effective manner. That's why we're working with Evotech. This stuff is becoming a reality now in the combination of what we've learned about where to place the cells in a device, about protecting the cells from the immune system attack. Incredible scientific discoveries have been made over the past 20 years that has taken us to this point. What we're really having to do now is, before we get this approved to be in millions of people with diabetes, we have to go through clinical trials. And this is controlled by the FDA. And it's a really good thing because they want to make sure that the product is safe for everyone. And we want to make sure the product is working well so that when we go out and get this product approved, you know that it's going to be safe for your relatives. And that's why you have to go through clinical trials to get to approval.
Before I let you go, I am curious. The person that was the first one through these trials, you said, is insulin independent now. Have you talked to that person? I mean, what's their reaction?
So we have to kind of have a bit of a wall between the people that are getting these products in clinical trials and ourselves. We can't really know their names and this kind
ethics.
of thing.
Propriety.
So I have seen patients from other groups advertised in the New York Times, various things. I don't find that ethical, to be honest. I consider Sernova is not well known yet because we built very, very, very deep scientific roots in our technology before we are coming out to the public in a big way. And at the same time, we have very high ethical standards where we put what we call that wall between the physicians and patients and the company because they have to be independent completely from us. But our first person who has type 1 diabetes actually wrote a quote because they wanted to us, and I can send that to you.
Oh, that'd be wonderful.
This person has had type 1 diabetes for 47 years. They've taken over 3,000 injections. They've been on insulin pumps. They've been on needles. They've been on continuous glucose monitors. They've been to many, many, many doctors with their symptoms. Now they have been, truly insulin independent and for 2 years. And this person is pretty happy. And it's, kind of what we would expect. And they're doing really well. And it's a pretty joyous thing. I know, like, we're a company. The thing about it is people go, you're a company, but it costs a lot of money to be able to develop these products. But the really cool thing is that we are helping people. Our goal is to truly help people, and that's what we're doing, right? So we're going to continue this until we have these technologies on the market for people. I think this is a process, and like I said, we have to learn a lot of things to be able to get something that can treat everyone. But our goal is, when you think about the three technologies and the way we've done this, we're setting everything up so that we can treat millions of people that have type 1 diabetes around the world. And that's what we see the future as being. And yet we'll get told, I don't want to use the immunosuppression. But guess what? When we're working with people that have severe hypoglycemia unawareness, and as you mentioned, they could slump over the steering wheel while they're driving and cause an accident. Yeah. These people, we can help these people, right? And Dr. Witowski, working with Sernova, can help these people. And that is a really good first step to eliminate that. And then as we're moving forward, then we eliminate the immune protection medications and we add the stem cell technology, and then we have something that can be used by everyone. And we're working with the FDA to make sure that the products that we're using are safe for people, and that's kind of how it works. We're all working together as a giant team here, and that includes people that have type 1 diabetes who are willing to be in clinical trials. It involves the physicians who are willing to give up their time to be able to do these studies and all their staff. It involves all the scientists in the companies that are working on developing these technologies. It involves investors who are willing to take the chance to put money into the company to be able to help get there. So it is a whole team. It's everyone trying to work together to make this happen. So I think it's really important for us to all realize that together we are a team. And also there are a number of companies that are trying to do this, and we all, in a way, are helping to advance the field as things become more and more successful. And I also have to say that to Juvenile, Diabetes Research Foundation is incredible at coordinating and pulling everyone together. And they are very, very important in terms of communication and providing funds to help us develop these technologies and to be able to bring the best people in the world to make it happen. So this is a team to make this work.
Well, I hope you'll keep us posted and come back on the show when there's more to talk about. But I really appreciate you explaining and putting it all out there. Thank you so much for joining me.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
There's a lot of information here, and you can learn more about Sernova and stem cell therapy over at diabetes-connections.com, including the study I talked about before the interview. Dr. Toleikis referred to it a couple of times there. I'll link that up as well. It's a frustratingly slow process, but these things are coming. They are working. Am I jumping up and down excited and thinking Benny might have this done before he goes to college? Yeah, absolutely not. But I am very, very hopeful. And I love talking to these folks because they really are getting it done. And it's amazing to see the process and how much it's changed. All right, up next, I want to talk about camp and what's going on with us this year. Lots of diabetes camps are kicking off, lots of regular camps. That's us, the non-diabetes sleepaway camp people. So I'm going to share that with you in just a moment. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Dexcom. And I do get a lot of questions about Dexcom coverage for people on Medicare. And why not? It's not like you stop needing a CGM the minute you turn 65. Well, the good news is that the Dexcom G6 continuous glucose monitoring system is covered for Medicare for patients who meet the coverage criteria. If you have either type 1 or type 2 and intensively manage insulin, you may be covered. To find out more about what that means and if you qualify, check out Dexcom.com/G6-Medicare. I will put that right in the show notes so you don't have to remember it or type it out. You're going to want to talk to your doctor, and you may even be able to get your Dexcom supplies at the pharmacy, saving time and money. Again, that link, but it will be in the show notes, is Dexcom.com/G6-Medicare. As you are listening to this, if all has gone well, Benny is at camp for 8 weeks. As I'm taping this, we are packing him up. He's pretty much packing himself up, which I got to say is making me a little bananas. But he's got the checklist, and my husband has promised to go over it with him. I am in charge of packing the diabetes supplies, and that's only because I am simply not ready to let it go. I just can't yet. Hey, I'm allowed. He's only 17. I will let go soon, I promise. But packing the diabetes supplies just gives me more peace of mind, right? He can forget a pillow, which we did forget pillows for my children one year. And then I just said, oh, I'll Amazon them to you. No problem. I sent them pillowcases. I did not send actual pillows. So for the first week of camp, my children used sweatshirts and towels to sleep on. Yes, I am the world's worst mom. Forget diabetes mom. But camp will do that to you. You will find that your kids adapt to things at camp that they would never adapt to at home, which is just another great thing about camp. As I'm taping this, my house looks like it's such a mess because we have stuff everywhere. We are packing him for 8 weeks. Yes, they do laundry. That's a question I get asked a lot. So he doesn't exactly need 8 weeks worth of stuff. I'm packing at least 8 weeks worth of diabetes stuff. I mean, there's an infirmary there, so the insulin will be in the fridge, and I want him to have extras of things. And I'm already finding stuff that I want to order a little bit more of, like skin tack, and making sure I have overlays for the Dexcom. And I can send more of that to the medical center there. So I'm really not that concerned about forgetting something, but I want him to be able to find it easily. And I don't want him to worry about having backup stuff there. So our plan this year is a little different than in the past because Benny is a CIT, a counselor in training. And that means, and I didn't realize this, that means that he can have his phone in the cabin, which means that theoretically he could share his Dexcom numbers with me, something we have never done at camp. If you are new, Benny has gone to this camp since he was 8 years old. It is a regular camp. It is a non-diabetes camp. There are a couple of other kids there with type 1. I don't know about this year, but there have been in the past. He went for 2 weeks when he was 8. Honestly, I think that was a little too young. I've talked about that before. He did fine. Nothing went wrong, but it was a lot. And then he has gone for 4 weeks since he's 9 years old. Camp does not take care of him. They will not dose him or do finger sticks or check Dexcom stuff. They will supervise. And at this age, that pretty much means, and I just talked to them about this the other day, means being there when he asks. Obviously, if something is wrong, they will call me. But we have spent every summer like this without share and follow because there is terrible service at the camp and the kids aren't allowed to have their phones, which I think is great. No screens at this camp, including no phones. I talk about this a lot in my book, The World's Worst Diabetes Mom, about how, we went for 7 years with no Dexcom, which I think makes it a lot easier to do things like this. He was 9 when he got his Dexcom. I believe he was 11 when Share and Follow came into the world. So by that time, we'd already done school and camp and lots of stuff without always knowing what his number was every moment of the day. And while I much prefer this, thank you very much, especially as it pertains to AID systems, automated delivery systems, I love that. I'm not fearful to send him someplace without knowing his numbers, which brought us to the discussion of, I can see them now because he's going to be in his cabin at night. But we decided that it was not a great idea to change the routine that has worked for us for all of these years, especially now that Benny is so independent at home. I mean, I have turned off all of my Dexcom alarms in the past year, except for the urgent low. So he is going to turn off the follow when he gets to camp. I think he'll probably keep it on because he'll probably have one of his friends follow him. He's done that before. He'll have a counselor follow him, but he won't have his mom follow him. I will be unfollowed. We always talk a couple of days into camp, so we'll do that again. Probably talk once a week, which we've done in the past, to help adjust and kind of see what's going on. But here's my temptation. I don't think he knows about this. Dexcom Clarity. It's usually a desktop, or you can see it on your app. I've talked about it on the show before. You can see everything on Dexcom Clarity. I don't need him to share and follow because I have the Clarity login. So theoretically, I could just check Clarity, and every time he connects to the phone, it'll fill in what has been missed. I don't know if I should do that. That feels like cheating. I've never had this temptation before at camp because he never even had his phone. So we would wait until he came home and then Clarity would backfill. It's pretty amazing stuff. I don't know. It's 8 weeks though. And there isn't even a visiting day. When I went to camp, and I went to camp for 8 weeks when I was younger than Benny, my parents would come for a weekend right in the middle. And we'd have visiting day and it was fun. And, they had special activities and no, none of that. The CITs have their own program in between the 2 4-week camp sessions. So I told him already, I might fabricate, oh, you forgot your Dexcom overlays and you need me to drive those to you or something like that. I mean, it's good. It's very good. But, be careful when you tell your kids they can be independent and confident because they will take you up on it. Oh boy, I'll keep you posted during the summer about his adventures at camp. I'm sure something interesting will happen. It always does. All right. Thank you, as always, to my editor, John Buchanan at Audio Editing Solutions. Thank you as you listen. I will be back in just a couple of days. I am planning to have In the News this Friday. We are actually out of town for a couple of days. I will be posting on social if anything changes. Right now, the schedule is a little up in the air, but it shouldn't be changing. But I will definitely keep you posted. The Facebook group is the best place for that, and the newsletter that comes out on Tuesdays as well. So I'll see you back here soon. Until then, be kind to yourself.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.